Before I started bonsai, I found myself asking this question: what is the best species for bonsai? Here are my 3 top bonsai trees for beginners starting their bonsai journey. First of all, I think it's best to establish what makes a good bonsai tree for a beginner. For those of you that also live in the UK, you'll know already that we get a lot of different weather conditions, whether that's snow in the winter, sun in the summer, or wind and rain for most of the time. Having a wide range of weather in the UK means that it's best for beginners to pick a species that is hardy to different weather conditions. This also goes for people all across the globe. It doesn't just have to be the UK. I think the best thing to do is to make sure that the tree that you're picking is suited for the conditions that it's going into. The second thing that makes a good bonsai tree for beginners, in my opinion, is a tree that grows quite well. By picking a species of bonsai that grows quite quickly, it gives a beginner the opportunity to prune their tree a lot. This gives you plenty of opportunity to practice pruning techniques. You can also start getting yourself familiar with wiring and also just enjoy the tree whilst it's growing. If as a beginner you pick a species that struggles to grow and it takes quite a lot of extra care compared to some other species, you can lose your encouragement to do bonsai and continue growing your trees just because it's quite a difficult species to look after, whereas if you pick something that's a lot more simple to take care of, it makes the whole process a lot more enjoyable from the start. So now that you know that, what are 3 good species for bonsai beginners? Behind me on the right here in the black bonsai pot is a Cotoneaster Horizontalis. There are a couple of different species of Cotoneaster that work well for bonsai. The Horizontalis is one of those. The other common one that you'll find is the Microphyllus. Both of these species have small leaves which works really well for bonsai and they're easily growable. You can probably see from this tree here that even though I pruned it quite recently, only a few weeks ago, it's already sprouting out a lot of new growth even though we're starting to move into the autumn. So as I mentioned before, this is one of the criteria that works really well for beginners in bonsai. You can see how quickly it's growing, which means it gives you plenty of chances to prune. There's shoots coming out from all over the place, even though this was only taken back a few weeks ago. Another thing that you might easily be able to spot on this tree is the amount of little red berries that it's got on it. Now these little red berries grow towards the end of summer through the autumn and into the winter, and they almost look like tiny little apples. This is another thing that I love about the Cotoneaster bonsai, is that it's got an all year interest. So you can see at the minute as we move into the autumn, it's got these lovely little red berries on it. But when these eventually fall or get eaten by birds during the winter, you'll see that as we move into the spring, you'll start to get lots of little white flowers all over the tree. Again, these might only last for a month or 2, but when you start moving into the summer, you get nice green leaves and a lot of long growth. Another reason why the Cotoneaster is such a good bonsai for beginners is that it's quite readily available in bonsai nurseries and also just in garden centres across the UK. Earlier this year I picked up one Cotoneaster Horizontalis for £7 from B&Q, and it was actually 2 trees in one plant pot which I've managed to separate, so I've now got 2 little projects growing at the same time for £7. When you compare that to the likes of different species such as Itoyagawa juniper, such as this one here, you can quite often find these for sale anywhere between £10 and £30 for a cutting probably this size. So when you compare that to something like this Cotoneaster that costs £70 for a full tree, then as a beginner you're probably more likely to want something that looks like a good tree and grows well compared to something really small and quite needy. You'll probably notice that you see Cotoneaster in a lot of gardens in the UK. This is because it's quite a hardy tree and can withstand UK weather conditions. Cotoneaster can take quite a lot of water as long as the roots don't stay wet all the time. They're not particularly needy with fertiliser either, so they are quite a hardy tree and they don't really need a lot of specific care, which makes it great for someone beginning in bonsai, because if you do forget to water it or if you do forget to fertilise it, as long as it doesn't completely dry out, then the tree's going to survive. Another great thing about the Cotoneaster is that they root very well from cuttings, so they're really easy to propagate. And as a beginner in bonsai, if you can make 3 trees out of something that you've already bought, then I think that's a great way to expand your collection to start with for not much extra cost. So for those reasons, as I've just mentioned, that's why the Cotoneaster Horizontalis makes it into my top 3 species for bonsai beginners. So moving on to another species, you might be able to see it just behind me, I've got a Chinese elm. Chinese elm are one of the most common trees that you'll find in a bonsai nursery, mainly because they're mass produced, they're really easy to grow, and if you cut a branch off of a Chinese elm you can pretty much just put it in some soil and end up growing some roots and you'll get a tree from it. So as with the Cotoneaster, the Chinese elm roots really easily from cuttings, So if you're looking to purchase a tree to take some cuttings from and multiply your collection, then the Chinese elm is a great species to do that with. So this little Chinese elm is actually the first bonsai tree that I ever got, and it was actually gifted to me by my girlfriend for my birthday. You'll be able to see that similar to the Cotoneaster, the Chinese elm has got really small leaves which work really well for bonsai because it gives it that aesthetic of looking like a big tree but in a small pot. You'll probably be able to tell from the long whips that I've got on these shoots. This one is one that's only grown for probably the last few months, so they grow really quickly, which means that you get a lot of chances to cut these back during the year. This tree in particular I probably pruned back 3 or 4 times this year, so they grow really well. So as a beginner it's great because it gives you a lot of chances to cut things back, you get a chance to wire stuff, you can practice your techniques on it. So I think this is probably one of the best bonsai trees in my opinion for someone just starting out. One thing to note though with a Chinese elm is that it is a deciduous tree, which means as you come into autumn and winter, don't be too scared if you see that the leaves are falling off because that's quite normal and they'll regrow again in the spring, ready for the next growing season. Another reason why the Chinese elm is so great for beginners is, again, it can take a lot of punishment before the tree will actually start to fail on you. If you're pruning your tree back and you cut off a branch that you didn't really want to cut off, don't worry about it too much because it will likely grow back within the next couple of seasons and it will be easily replaced because they grow that quickly. It's another tree again where it's very well adapted to UK conditions, so it can take quite a lot of water as long as it's not sitting in water all the time. If it dries out a little bit, it doesn't really matter too much as long as it's not totally dry. They can quite often be placed in full sun, although during the heat of the summer I prefer to put mine in some partial shade just to give it a bit of a break. As long as you give your Chinese elm enough water, it can handle full sun during the summer. You'll also notice that this Chinese elm behind me has got quite smooth bark on the trunk, but there are some species of Chinese elm, known as cork bark Chinese elms, that grow really old looking bark in a short space of time. I haven't actually managed to get my hands on one of these cork bark Chinese elms yet, but I have seen them in person and they're a great tree. They look really old despite being quite young, which gives a really good impression of it being an old tree in a small pot. So for those reasons just mentioned, that's why the Chinese elm gets into my top 3 list for the best species of bonsai for beginners. So just behind me on the left here, you might be able to see the next tree that I'm going to talk about, which is an Acer Palmatum, or in this case, a Japanese maple, Doshojo. Japanese maples are one of my favourite species to grow as a bonsai tree. They've got delicate little flowers on them that change colour throughout the season. They have great displays of colour, particularly in the spring and the autumn, where most of the colour change and the leaves happen. And ever since I started bonsai, it's one of those species of trees that really draw me in. There are some difficulties with Japanese maples. For example, they can be a little bit more needy in terms of care. They don't particularly like being in full sun during the summer, and they also need a bit more shelter from the wind. If you don't do this, then you can end up with leaves that are scorched from the sun and look a bit crispy. Acers are also available from a lot of garden centres as well as bonsai nurseries, so are readily available and can be made into great bonsai after some time and effort is put into them. They're also a really good species to air layer, which allows you to multiply and expand your collection relatively quickly. Japanese maples are one of my favourite species of bonsai with so many different cultivars and styles, which is why it makes it into my top 3 list. If you're new to bonsai and want to know what mistakes you should be avoiding that could kill your bonsai trees, then check out the other videos on my channel. If you enjoyed the video, then please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.